Hello, this is Randy Wooden, and this is from the Wooden Desk. I'm so grateful that you joined me today on this third episode of Next Level Leadership. It's my prayer, as always, that in a practical way, an empowering way, through the instruction, that there will be some inspiration that is going to be with information that ultimately is going to lead to transformation. With that said, we talked about in our last lesson this sense of leading in some of the challenges that we're facing around. We talked about the challenge last time was to be able to get new leaders in our ministry to lead in the midst of all that we're facing. But the second point here of one of the challenges is leading in the midst of new pains. Now, this one is more of a difficult part because more and more leaders are struggling with the personal pain that they are going through because of doing ministry, because of trying to lead a business. And the sense that I think it's very important for all of us to know that sometimes God uses pain. You know, sometimes I think it was C.S. Lewis who said, God whispers to us in our pleasures, but speaks to us in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to arouse a deaf world. Sometimes our world can become deaf because there's so much noise and we're hearing the static and the white noise, so to speak, but we're not hearing him. And I'm saying, God, let me hear your voice. Let me hear what you're saying. But sometimes we can't hear him because we're in so much pain ourselves. So as we talk about this, first of all, today's leaders are facing new pains like never before. I think it's important for every one of us to realize that what I would be the first thing is the exploding rate of change. You know, I was told several years ago when I was doing some leadership development and was growing in my leadership that they were saying that technology is changing at such a fast rate, and it talked about how that it changes every 2 years and the companies are having to retool, and now it's even down to months that change is happening. And what I realize is whether we like it or not, that's affecting our organizations. So this exploding rate of change sometimes brings pain. Not only that, but the rapid technology innovations. Just as I said, as soon as you get a phone and you get the current version, tomorrow it's going to have something you don't have. And it's just continually changing. And so many times in our organizations, we feel like we're 10 years behind simply because it costs so much just to get to where it was 10 years ago. And now we're being called upon to have the latest and the greatest. And let me just say this. I think it's great to have the best sound and lighting and technology. I think that's all great if you can afford it. But if you can't, that is not what is going to just grow your organization. So many people say, "Well, if I don't have that, I can't reach the younger generation, and I'll miss this." And I'm like, okay, well, work at getting there, but understand that just being in people's lives is one of the most important things you can do, and speaking truth and love. So anyway, that's another thought. But some of the challenges of pains is the exploding rate of change, this area of rapid technological innovations. Number three is this area of finding honest and competent people. Sometimes that's a pain because you just can't find people who are going to tell you what needs to be said. Number four is this area of serving a multicultural generation. I don't, I'm not just talking about the ethnic backgrounds so many times or the color of an individual. What I'm realizing is that people in the culture we're living are from so many backgrounds that the pains that it can cause a leader, because you're communicating one way to one person, and another person is that person is very positive and encouraging, but another person's hearing what you're saying and it's irrelevant or it's hurtful to them. So I think it's very important that we're serving a multicultural generation, but we have to be willing. Not only that, but building the right programs can be painful. Not only that, but the increase or the decrease of membership can be a pain. Wow. Not only that, but ever-ending need for what I call the right resources. Man, what's the best resource for this? Maybe the resource you write, or it may be the resource somebody else that you begin to learn and grow and pull from that's going to help you go to the next level leadership that we're talking about. And then this area of leading in a world filled with pandemic, past and present. Kind of going back to the decrease of membership or just those who are attending church. Some of the startling statistics talk about, that 60% of the people came back to church. Where's the other 40%? And 20 of that 40 will probably never go back to church. When I hear statistics like that, it's very concerning. Or I just heard a statistic last week, 87% of all the 20 to 30-year-olds see church as irrelevant. They see church as, I don't need it. In the sense I'm thinking, dear God, everybody needs it. But those things cause pain to me as a leader. Thinking, oh God, I'm trying to reach out, and there's people who think I'm irrelevant. Well, sometimes I am irrelevant. Sometimes I have got to change if I'm going to reach the current generation. That can cause a lot of pain. Not only that, but I think it's important as I go through this and facing some of today's new pains that I'm facing, that when you're a pastor, you're always processing. At least I know as a leader, I'm always processing. It can be very painful sometimes to think, my thinking is wrong. It's painful to begin to think that I'm not being productive for this reason. Not only that, but number 3 is you will grow only to the ability to handle pain, or your threshold, if you will, of pain. Your willingness to handle pains you encounter will determine your level of leadership that you rise to. The one thing I learned a long time ago, if you got thin skin or you get hurt feelings, you will get them hurt if you're going to lead. Because there's always going to be somebody, whether they're jealous or somebody's got a critical attitude, somebody's got a word of advice, somebody's going to pull you down. It just seems like human nature so many times is sometimes when somebody is a good leader, there are other people there to try to sabotage them. And unfortunately, a lot of people allow stuff like that to affect them, to keep them from growing in their leadership. You will never rise if you stay in that kind of pain. People can be rude, but I think it's important for us to realize that. Not only that, but there are 3 kinds of pains leaders are facing. I believe, first of all, is this area of external pains, such as the cultural changes and the external pressures and the competitive, what I call realities. I'm going to say that again. External pains, such as the cultural changes, the external pressures, and the competitive realities. Cultural shifts demand what I believe new ways of looking at things and new vocabulary. You are no longer in control. The things that you had in control just seem to be wiggling out of your grasp, so to speak. And you're just like, I had it, but now I don't have it. See, heeding those pains can keep you from becoming irrelevant. And yet irrelevance is irrelevant. What do you mean? Irrelevance, when we're not relevant, I want to tell you, it's going to affect everything around us. People say, and I'm hearing this now, well, you're older. Well, yeah, but I'm stayed current. And I think that's key. I'm not going to be irrelevant. I don't want to be a relic, just sitting on a shelf somewhere. So what do I have to do? I have to be willing to bear the pain of somebody saying you're old, and yet realize they don't know who I am. They don't know what I have done to stay fresh and to stay current in doing leadership. I think that's very important for everyone to hear. But I think when you talk about the pains, you first of all have to realize externally there are pains. Not only that, but what the next one is what I call organizational pains, such as conflict, decision-making, and higher stakes. I believe that the success of a growing organization will always bring new pains. The anxiety of the struggle to make the right decisions always brings pain. It's just amazing. You make a decision, you think, man, this is going to be awesome, only to realize three people got angry as a result of the decision that you made. We know what that's like as leaders. And if you can't handle that kind of pain, then you're probably in the wrong occupation or even calling in a sense, because so many times we have started. I remember, and we've talked about failing forward. There's things over the years that we've done that I thought, man, this is going to be the greatest thing, and it bombed. And man, I got criticism for it. I remember one time we were developing a satellite center back when satellites were for leaders, and this has probably been 24, 25 years ago. It was when leadership, new leadership concepts, and it was I had bought into becoming a leadership center that was going to each month have a live feed of spending a day with a key leader in the United States. It would be one or be a panel of leaders. And basically, I'd become the leadership center for what was the Hampton Roads area. And so I was sent out 150, 200 letters to churches, made phone calls, was excited about this center. It was really just going to draw people because of some of the personalities that were going to be speaking, only to realize, as we begin to get in this, they were only two or three who showed up, and it wasn't even 6 months into this thing. It dived and it crashed. And was I disappointed? Yeah, I was disappointed. And I put a lot of money and energy into that. Did I learn something from it? Yes, I learned a lot of things from it. But during that time, I remember how personal I took that. I took that so personal that it affected me for several weeks until I could probably finally shake it off and realize it was okay to fail. Or back then, I didn't think that was an option. And what I realized is experimenting sometimes is going to be at the expense of failure, but you get to learn. That becomes a part of your experience, so to speak. I think this is important in the area of organizational management. In organizations, sometimes this brings new pains. Not only that, but internal pain, such as discovering yourself and your limits, inadequacies, your relationship. Things don't turn out as we expect so many times. Often there is an inability to articulate what I call the internal realities. Wow. See, so many times in a traditional organization, many a times trying to get it from tradition to becoming what I call a vital current entity that's going to make an impact, there's a lot of resistance. Probably the hardest thing a leader will do. Take an old church setting or an old business that has been in a place of stalemate or declining, and turn it around. And so many times you may have all the innovation in the world, but then there are dominant coalitions that are within the territory of that new environment, and all of a sudden you feel like you're in the midst of, man, God, you called me here, but I am dealing with all of this stuff. And some of that stuff is irrelevant, but yet it's the sacred cow, so to speak, of somebody else. And what happens so many times is we get hurt in the process because we're trying to move the status quo. I know earlier in one of my pastorates, within the first 3 years, we had started growing, and a lot of people did not like growing. They did not like the direction we were going, even though I believed it was what we needed to do. And I remember several of them rose up and said, we're going to take the people and go do our own church. And remember, I went through the classical church split, and people chose to leave, and other people chose to stay. And it's a very difficult time for my family, for me. But what I realized in that is during that time of pain made me the leader that I am today. I actually went back to the individuals that went through some of that and, tried to mend bridges, of course, but I blessed them and I told them later, thank you, because what you did helped me become the leader I am today. And you might think that's silly, but it's the pain that we have that forges the leader that we are and are going to become. And I think that's important for us to look at this because new pains will always be a part of our life as you continue to climb the ladder of your destiny. So, if I were to confess about one of my greatest pains, I want to close with this in question. As I said, I was going to leave each episode with a question. I would say one of my greatest pains is to give away my influence and place people in a place of leadership only for them to use their agenda and basically use my influence for their own self-centered purpose. And I'll be honest, that's probably hurt me more than anything because there have been people I poured myself into, and it wasn't that I expected. And of course, since then, I've understood and realized I've got to let that go, so to speak. And I'm not in a place that I'm in unforgiveness or anger anymore. But have I been? Yes, I have been in anger. I had been in a place of being hurt. It caused a lot of discouragement. But so many times we pour into people. I've learned that I'm responsible to do what God placed me, and that's pour into people. I'm not responsible how they use that I've given them, but I am to hold them accountable the best that I can as a senior leader. But I know sometimes that rub is hard on me, and there's been pains that I've suffered. There's no doubt some of you that I'm talking to could say, man, that is one of the areas that I struggle with too. But I think it's important for everyone to identify what are the pains that you're facing externally that may be from the culture, your organizational areas that may be struggling, that you may be struggling that are causing pain, or the internal areas. And I would say, first of all, we can do something about the internal ones. We can't always do something about what's happening externally or something that's happening in an organization, even though is a senior person or a person who may be leading that. Sometimes you have to make the hard decisions, or you have to have the hard meeting. You have to have that hard talk or discussion that needs to take place. But I think it's important for every one of us to be able to understand this. What I realize is that as hard as it is sometimes to know you've given everything you've got only to get hurt by somebody, there's always going to be more that you have impacted and you have influenced that are going to do what they do for the glory of God. So with that said, and coming to a close, I want to ask you this question: what is one pain in ministry or in your business place that is a challenge for you personally as it relates to this section? Let me say that one more time. What is one pain in ministry that is a challenge for you personally as it relates to this area that we just talked about? Well, today I pray God has spoken to you, and I pray if you are dealing with some pain, that get the help you need. If you have to get to a counselor or to a colleague, somebody that you can be honest with. Sometimes tears become cleansing. You can cry or you can vent so that you can be whole inside. So again, we're talking about 8 challenges. We've dealt with the first 2, and we're getting ready to move into the third one in our next episode. I look forward to seeing you. May God bless you and enlarge the kingdom of God in you and around you. God bless.